Welcome to the Hawkeye Sidekick podcast. And you're very welcome back to the Hawkeye Sidekick hurling podcast with your host Mark Kennedy, joined this week by Kieran Collins. Kieran, how are things?
Very good, Mark. Yourself?
Yeah, great. All good now. Another weekend fast approaching. I know we have a bye week in Intercounty hurling, but I suppose we'll have a review of last weekend, round 3 of the Allianz Hurling League. Probably main headlines probably were the games between Wexford Clare, Limerick Galway and Dublin Tipperary. I suppose we'll start first off in Chadwick's Park in Wexford. The scoreline was a bit of an eye-opener, but you were there at it. Clare comprehensively winning that match. I suppose, what were your overall impressions of the game?
The trend of the league this year has been, waiting for Thursday, Friday night at 9 o'clock to see what teams are named and trying to guess what intent might be on a given Sunday. And I think when Clare named, 8 personnel changes from the Limerick game, bringing back in John Conlon, Tony Kelly, Ryan Taylor, Flanagan, I think we knew straight away that Clare were intending to give this game a go. I think Rory had said last week as well, there's been a bit of history between these two counties in the last couple of years. So I suppose we expected Clare coming down to hurl and give it a proper go. And, from the start, I don't think anyone expected this response from Clare after the Limerick game. After 20 minutes, 3-9 to 1-4. Was it Clare being absolutely good? They were good, but I think Wexford were absolutely atrocious as well. They were literally all over the place, especially at the back. I think, a lot of people talking and they're giving the players the players seem to be taking the blame in this one. Obviously, there's no experience. They're fringe players, a lot of them, and for a lot of them, maybe the players are the problem. But I also think tactics were a huge issue as well. I think the problem for Wexford is they have it's size issue and physicality compared to other teams like Galway, Limerick, and you could put Clare in that bracket as well. And I think they just lack that size. And when it comes to puck outs especially, there seems to be a fear of the keeper putting a long ball down on top of on their half forward line. Wexford in the first half, playing against the wind, went with a sharp puck out. Clare were happy to give him. Clare didn't contest him. Clare just sat back. So it kind of was a case of either corner back getting the ball, running out to the middle third area which is congested. And 4 out of the 6 goals, I would say, came from turnovers from the short puck out. I think if you're looking on from the sideline, the anger, I suppose, what do you call it in the crowd, like just pull it along, because okay, you'd forgive one goal, maybe 2, but third time, fourth time it happened. And I suppose for me there was no change in the tactic. They still progressed with the short puck out. I suppose it was poor execution at times, but I just didn't see the end result. Like, the end result was taking the short puck out, playing a long ball over the middle third area, which is fairly congested, which in turn is a 50-50 ball. So why not just puck the ball out long in the first place? If you're going to play a ball that's going to be 50-50, puck it long and hope for the best. And at least the ball is not in front of your goal, which is what happened to Clare, like 3-4 goals that they ran in at their ease. I just think it was really, really shocked. Tactically, I think Dara Egan got it wrong. Okay, I think the biggest thing he got wrong was not changing it. We looked at Clare, the way they approached the puck out, especially in the first half. They were playing with the wind. There's always a fairly sizable wind in Wexford Park. And I think the one ball to note was they played one long ball down for Aidan McCarthy's goal. Clare had like a box, 4 Clare players in the landing area. I think it was Peter Duggan broke the ball, and Aidan McCarthy picked it up with his will and just slotted it home. But second half, similar situation. Wexford were playing a long ball in on top of Colin McDonald, who is a ball winner, but the closest player to him, Rory Higgins, might have been 10 yards away. So there was no one there for the breaking ball. So things like that. I just question the tactics. Wexford are a proud hurling county, and shipping 4-17 in 35 minutes of hurling. It's not in their DNA. It's not in their makeup. They pride their teams on being at least competitive. They don't pride their teams, or they don't judge their teams on success. It's more on how competitive they are. And I think that has a lot of fans seeding down here. Is just that they weren't at the races at all. They had no shape. I think the attitude was completely wrong. I'm going to note the second last goal where, okay, a young player, Owen Murphy, got the ball from a short puck out. I don't even know how, but Peter Duggan took the ball off him in an instant. And instead of, you'd imagine Owen Murphy, turning, bursting the gut to get back, he didn't. He sauntered back. Goal was scored. And I think that showed the attitude. And I suppose for young guys who are, majority team of French players that, if you're going to put your hand up, you're going to try your best. And I suppose that's one thing from a hurling point of view for Wexford, or from that's frustrating. Now, I suppose looking at the Wexford team, if you were to compare the team that lined out on Sunday against Clare, that would have lined out in the All-Ireland quarter-final last year, players missing would have been Mark Fanning, Liam Ryan, Matthew O'Hanlon, Paddy Foley, Conor Devitt, Liam McGovern, Roy O'Connor, Oisin Foley, Lee Chin, Dee O'Keefe. That's 10 players missing from last year's All-Ireland quarter-final. So I think, it's not all doom and gloom for this year especially. It's when these players come back in, not all are. I know Paddy Foley is away, but I think all the other 9 players, will see action. It'll be a different Wexford team, and I've no doubt that come championship they will be competitive. But I think it's just kind of shown that, the depth, that what might be in Wexford at the minute. And, you're looking at certain players at their age, Lee Chin, Matthew O'Hanlon, Dee O'Keefe, Liam McGovern, they're all the wrong side of 30. And I suppose for me, looking forward is, when these guys do step away, which won't be long for some of these guys, who's going to take over. At the minute, you're looking and going, right, who's the next Lee Chin, who's the next Dee O'Keefe? And at the minute, it's very hard to see it.
Yeah, Kieran, because the guys you mentioned here is right down the spine of this team, really, isn't it? I mean, but I think Darragh Egan had set the stall out fairly early in the league that he was going to blood these new guys in. He needed to test the squad depth. And I suppose this is kind of a reality check to Darragh Egan and the French players, that it's certainly not good enough. I mean, from a Darragh Egan perspective, I think he's probably formed an assessment on one or two of the prospects on this game, which is probably for the worst. So from a Darragh Egan perspective, he's not going to have too many conundrums here about guys really breaking into the team. He will be looking really at the marquee guys to kind of come back and making an immediate impact.
Yeah, and I think if you're looking back the last few years, Wexford haven't been too far away. Like 2019, playing Tipperary in an Ireland semi-final. I think they probably lacked a bit of depth that year. And again, last year against Clare, Wexford were the better team that day. Roy O'Connor unfortunately went off injured, maybe 10-15 minutes into that game. I think the strength and depth, lack of strength and depth showed that day that, okay, Roy O'Connor's an exceptional player, but to lose a player that stature, that, you're kind of looking at the bench and going, there's no one here that's, percentage as good or even close to being as good as Roy O'Connor. I think that's where Wexford are lacking, especially with the new format, the round robin, it's testing on teams. You need big panels, you need, tested panels that are ready to go, to war when called for. And I think that's, as I said, Darragh Egan would have a fairly good 15 championship, but it's the 5 or 7 players that you do need. As we all know, that this starters and finishers, just Wexford won't have, in my eyes, the quality that's needed for players to come on and finish out games.
Because it's certainly going to need at least 4 or 5 guys off the bench really in the final quarter to secure wins here. And I mean, you mentioned about the Senior Hurling Championship round robin. I know there's games here against Westmeath, which, let's be brutally honest, they only got a draw against Westmeath last year. But there is away games to Galway. There's an away game to Dublin here. I know Chadwick's Wexford Park hosts Kilkenny. I think the fact of the matter is here, Wexford need to kind of pick up form urgently here. I mean, look at the remaining fixtures here, Kieran. They're away in Cork, Páirc Uí Chaoimh on the 12th of March, and then followed by an easy task here against reigning All-Ireland champions Limerick in the Gaelic grounds. So, I mean, it doesn't get any easier for Darragh Egan here. And, I mean, maybe you can talk of Cathal Dunbar, maybe McGuckin as well, who came in with 3 and 2 points respectively. And maybe Banville as well for his free-taking ability. But apart from that here, Kieran, there's an awful lot of work here for Darragh Egan management and the squad really to really address within the next few weeks before championship kicks off?
To be fair to Darrigan, he has, I think I suppose as a management, they've realised there's a lack of depth, and they have gone about it to try and unearth a few players. I think Charlie McGuckin, who had featured a bit last year, has really put his hand up this year. And as you mentioned, Cathal Dunbar as well. They put their hands up. Maybe that's two players that they have kind of, found for maybe a starting position. But I think as well, as a whole, if you look at the whole lot, I think I'd worry for Wexford unless intervention happens now in the next few years. And, you could see what happening in Wexford unless, the right action is taken. I think looking at the county board, a couple of decisions that are made, again, voted again this year, they run off a lot different to most hurling countries. They run off the county championships in a couple of weeks, before the football. So it's a long, for club players, it's a long part of the year to be training for serious championship games. It's all about championship, and no matter if it's inter-county or a club, that's the bread and butter is a championship, and it's a long, a few months training. In an instance where Wexford, you might play for 3, 4, 5 weeks, and if you don't get past the group stage, you're out, and your hurling year is over, essentially. Yeah. I think that's something that could be looked at. Or if you pick up an injury in that period, you're out, and all your year's work is in vain, really. I think another rule that has come in, Wexford have voted to go back to under 18 for minor, but they have a little clause put in as well that minor players can play in the senior grade while they are minor. So I think that's a rule that other counties haven't put in, but that's slowing down possible development of future players. I'm sure once it's managed and controlled, and the workload is controlled, I can't see any harm in certain players if they're good enough, playing even for club. Joe Canning would have played for a club at 15, okay, he's probably an exception, but I just can't see young guys who are 18, just playing minor, like what they could do for their career, just for even that 1 year, just to be playing in a maybe a junior or senior grade, that for their own development. And I think that's something that's going to hold young hurlers back in the county.
That could seriously deter, as you say, player development, particularly on the promising guy that really wants to strike it while it's hot in terms of inter-county career-wise. So, yeah, maybe a few questions there from a Wexford administration perspective. I suppose, Kieran, looking at Clare, I mean, really, they can't get a whole lot out of this game. Probably we're expecting a stiffer test. But maybe looking at David Reedy here, his emergence, this season, and he's had a very strong league campaign. I recall the Limerick game, particularly, where he did chip in with a nice score tally. And again, 2-1 from play. I mean, we've talked about Aidan McCarthy, massive boost for Clare as well. I know he was injured for the majority of the inter-county season last season. But again, there's guys here stepping up to the plate. Mark Rogers as well coming back into kind of full fitness as well. So there is some to the parts here for Brian Lohan to really kind of look at as we kind of get nearer to the championship here, Kieran.
Absolutely. I think even Abe McCarthy and Mark Rogers alone from last year are going to be huge pluses going into this year. Abe McCarthy is such a, beautiful striker of the ball, really intelligent player. Missed a few frees, but that's, it's going to happen on days. But, I thought he was full of running. He, very impressive. David Reedy, came on against Limerick, and he was the only bright spark in that Clare team on that day, coming on scoring 1-2, and I think he also 1-2 frees as well, and a short 10-15 minute spell. Yeah, Lohan, he'd be happy. They've come back after probably an embarrassing performance, more so than the results against Limerick. Don't think they're going to read too much into it. Job done. But Clare have really two good games to come at home to Galway and Cork. Still have Shane O'Donnell to come back in. They'll relish the battles to come, and I suppose they won't take much into this game. I think, Clare were good, but if you had to be honest, looking at it, Wexford were woeful as well. So it's not. I don't think it's a game that Lohan is going to use as at the end of the league or for anything to. I suppose there was positives for Clare, but I think this game will be brushed over and on to the next one fairly quick.
Yeah, I'd agree with you there, Kieran. I think Brian Lohan even conceded straight after. That wasn't a full reflection of the Wexford side that he would have expected in years gone by. again, I think he's pleased with certain aspects, particularly the forward line. I thought the pace-wise had Wexford in complete and utter chaos in that middle third. Again, the space that Clare players, particularly forward line, were getting, they won't get against the likes of Galway or Cork for that matter. So, look, it's a confidence-boosting win. They're 4 points from 3 games, and again, 2-game homestand to finish the league. Potentially, there's a semi-final appearance there at least for Clare if they win those games. So, look, onwards and upwards for Clare. I think it's going to be a fascinating watch, though, Kieran, definitely with Darragh Egan, Wexford, and I'd say as well the Wexford support base as well, Kieran, because you said to me off air here that there was a sense of frustration from the Wexford supporters, particularly at management, and I've heard that from other friends of mine from Wexford immediately after the game, that maybe Darragh Egan is, maybe there's a little bit of questions being raised here in terms of the stewardship of Darragh Egan here.
Even from my own point of view, I'm a Limerick man, born and bred, and always will be. But I suppose I'm living down here nearly 10 years now. I would have a fondness for Wexford hurling, and I'm involved coaching my son's team under 10s this year in local club Igate and playing a little bit here social hurling. But I would have a fondness for Wexford hurling, and even I felt that frustration myself. Watching them. I don't think the players, there was poor execution. I think the attitude was all wrong, but you'd be kind of questioning, why is the attitude wrong? You're into county hurling, there should be pride to be, be wearing your jersey for your county, not chasing back, not marking up. Look, frustration it is, but I think, Egan, I suppose, does, have the comfort to say that there is certain players to come back in who will steady the ship, and I'm sure Wexford had no shape, and even a scattering of experienced players in that team would solve that issue. Like Liam Ryan, as you said, the spine of the team is missing, and we've often commented to win any game or to be anyway successful, you have to have your spine of the team set up, and that wasn't there for Wexford. No full back. Simon Donoghue, who I don't ever remember playing full back, slotting in. I think the only consistent player in that team would have been Damien Reck, centre back. But apart from that, it was a new team, and I think slowly but surely, experience will start coming back in, and I said we will see a competitive Wexford for the championship. We hope, but I suppose for me, it's the longer role I'm thinking about, and I would worry for Wexford unless something is done, then intervention is needed of some sort at club level, and county board as well, making decisions that may hamper players. I think they need to be reassessed and looked at, because they're probably one of the only counties who have that rule in at the minute.
Yeah, I'd agree with you there, Kieran. I suppose from a Darragh Egan perspective, his post-game comments, thought maybe ill-advised, just taking on the chin, maybe put a portion of the blame to himself, protect the players. We're only in round 3 of the hurling league. The spine of the team is not there. He's there to really nurture the talent that's there. These are the best players in Wexford at the moment. I don't know what the situation and the atmosphere has been like in training this week, given the comments of Darragh Egan. So I think Darragh Egan has a bit of a repairing of the relationship here with the panel here, given those comments. So I think it's going to be an interesting watch here, Kieran, particularly with these games coming up, particularly with Cork in Páirc Uí Chaoimh. I know Cork had a 221-21 point win over Westmeath. Let's be brutally honest. I mean, Westmeath were thereabouts throughout the game. It was a very experimental Cork side. Shane Kingston top scored of 1-7, 6 of them from frees. Killian Doyle chipped in with 13 points, 11 from frees, but that tells the whole tale of the tape here in terms of Westmeath, and their scoring power was really dependent on Killian Doyle. So again, some good cameos here from Hayes, Power 2 points each, Callahan as well for 3 points, and Barrett as well 1-2. So look, Cork 3 from 3 there, and going well here, Kieran.
Yeah, and I think maybe for Wexford detriment, we haven't seen, I think most teams you could sit down and you might get 12 of the 15 positions or players named, but for Cork, I don't think there's many people who could sit down and name a starting 15 or potential 15 that might start. And I think we might see that in the next game or two. We haven't seen Jamie Harnedy. Horgan has little or involvement. He's really thrown the dice. He's really looked down the well and given everyone a go. Pat Ryan, to be fair, and I think the next 2 games, Cork are at home to Wexford and away to Clare. And I think this is probably the round anyway where we're going to start teams putting out their close to starting teams, for the last game or 2. But yeah, it's hard to know what team. He has so many options. we're talking about Wexford having, a lack of depth. I think Pat Ryan has so many options that it probably will be a conundrum enough for him to pick a starting 15. I suppose it's a better position to be in than what Darry Egan is in, I suppose.
Brought up a good point. I suppose we have the bye week this weekend. An awful lot of teams may be going for weekend get-togethers, getting more concerted training sessions under their belt. So I think round 4 we should really be seeing the emergence of a few lines here, particularly from Cork, because their fixture list is Wexford at home, and then they do have Clare away on the 19th. Again, that could be one where the two teams are really vying for a playoff spot in the semi-finals. So all to play for there, and I suppose for Pat Ryan it's been a good league campaign so far, but I think we said this 12 months ago as well, and we can see what happened there towards the latter end of the league and started the Munster Hurling Championship. So all to be revealed from Cork, really, as I say, attacking options. Plenty.
I think for Mark as well, for Westmeath, Killian Doyle went off injured, I think, near the end. So, hopefully, that would be a huge blow. I think, look, it's probably they're going to be facing a relegation playoff, probably versus Antrim Release on the other side. And, I think for there to have any chance, I think Killian Doyle needs to feature because, they're reliant on him, third loss in a row. I look to give Cork they give him a good game at the times. They came within 5 points 2 different occasions, so they'll probably take a bit of positives from that, and going into the next 2 rounds. But look, as we said, how harder can they get? Limerick and Galway next 2 games. So I said from Westmeath point of view, hopefully get Killian Doyle back in the field before the relegation match.
Exactly, and I suppose as a confidence booster, they were competitive, as you said here, Kieran, as we said, against an experimental Cork side, but Limerick straight up in Cusack Park, a big, large Limerick travelling support expected up in Mullingar, and then traditionally against Galway and Cusack Park as well. It's traditionally not a fixture that Westmeath have many fond memories, so, and I think Galway will be looking to get a result under their belt here going into the championship as well. So, as we say, probably hedging itself in terms of relegation playoff here. I suppose I was at Salt Hill, Pearse Stadium, amongst the 12,000 in a sun-kissed Pearse Stadium in February, hard to believe, for Galway and Limerick. And Limerick, 24 points, 19 win over Galway. And I suppose, Kieran, a good solid performance from Limerick here.
Yeah, I don't think they ever looked in doubt. I think they were in full control. Definitely the first half, but I think definitely until 57 minutes, we're 21-13 ahead, and then Galway came with 6 kind of unanswered points and bringing it back to 2-point game. And you're probably worrying a bit at that stage, but then Limerick kind of went up a gear or two again and pushed it back out. Tom Morrissey got 2 points there, back up to a 5-point game. Yeah, 14-7 at half time. Galway bringing in the big guns: Morrissey, Cloncaillan, Conor Whelan. Positioning a Whelan again for a second week in a row out around the half-forward line, which is kind of, you wonder, is it just a phony war kind of, or phony games that put teams off? Or I think for Conor Whelan to be at his best, he needs to be close to goal. But look, from a Limerick point of view, happy again. I suppose control the game. Shane O'Brien, I think, continuing to impress. For a young guy, he's really holding his own and not shying back. I think with Limerick as well, they're, Kylie's kind of gone about the right way. He's putting dots of inexperience in lines, probably one for each line. So the shape has been kept there. And I suppose the only worry, and it's probably a trend that's happened in the first few games, is we've allowed teams back into it. We were cruising at half time against Cork, and Cork came out in the second half and made it a different game. Same against Clare. Clare brought that game back to 6 points, and when it could have been closer to 14 or 15 points for Limerick, really. And again with Galway, you're 21-13 up with 12 or 13 minutes to go. I think that's one thing that would worry Kylie, not seeing out the game. Now I suppose you could make an excuse that substitutions and that, but I suppose it's one thing that that will worry him is not closing out the games earlier. And Galway were bangs back in that game again, and probably didn't deserve to be. Limerick had been the better team. Tom Morrissey was very impressive. I think overall a good game for Limerick away from home. I think Limerick, they're just comfortable on the ball. You look from 1 to 15, you look at Barry Nash and Kyle Hayes, really impressive again. Limerick are happy to play whatever way a team's up against them. Limerick are happy. Like, if Limerick have to work it through the lines, they will. Or if teams push up on them, they look for the long ball into space. So I think they adapt on the field. It's not something that I think it's just hurling IQ that they have, and it's probably trained into them that you adapt as accordance to the situation they find in the field, and it's very impressive from a Limerick fan to watch it. I think they're so far this year. I've been very happy with them.
I have been too. I mean, even the Cork performance up and round had an awful lot of good aspects to that performance. I suppose the final quarter there was a bit of a dip in performance. I think it's been a work in progress. It has evolved. And I think still John Kiley sees massive scope for improvement, which I think this time of year is always great, Kieran. I suppose the two guys I'd like to highlight is probably Cian Lynch. I thought he was absolutely outstanding. The space he was given, he just creates that space just for his game management. He was orchestrating, he was setting up, he scores the 3 points. I think we're getting to see Cian Lynch really evolve here game after game, and I think that's a huge positive for Limerick given the continued absence of Aaron Gillan inside. And I suppose Dan Morrissey, what can you say about Dan Morrissey? I know Tom will get all the headlines with the 8 points, but I think for defensive versatility, Kieran, Dan Morrissey has provided so many positional covers in recent seasons. He's showing that he's an able deputy here for Declan Hannon, particularly in the half-back line.
Yeah, and it would have been one position, we talked about it before we started, Mark, it would have been one position where I would have worried of an able replacement, that if Declan Hannon had picked up an injury, and a lot of people might have said Kyle Hayes, he would have played centre-back, especially with the Limerick under-20s. And I think, Dan Morrissey, for a guy to go from wing back to full back and win an All-Star, okay, I know he played there a few years ago, no success, but to go back and win an All-Star in a specialised position the full back is, I've no doubt that you could put Dan Morrissey in corner forward and he would do a job for you. He's that versatile, and I think credit to Dan, but you look across the team, you can see the same with Barry Nash. Barry Nash, ex-forward, wing back, now cornerback, and I think there's a few guys there that you could, I suppose that's what leaves teams guessing. No one guessed that all them years ago when Kyle Hayes went to wing back. It threw everyone, and I suppose having that in your arsenal, you can pull surprises on any given day and catch teams in the hop. And look, Limerick have depth. They've unbelievable depth, young players coming through. I actually heard it during the week that you kind of need one or two new players coming the year, and I think they have that this year in Cian Lynch and Peter Casey. That didn't feature last year. All-Ireland winning team, and them two guys, all-star hurlers coming back into the team, huge plus, along with the likes of Shane O'Brien and Adam English, Cathal O'Neill, who we've yet to see out in a minute. But that's, you could possibly say that there's 5 new hurlers this year putting their hand up for a starting place in that team from last year.
I think that's huge as well. Graham Mulcahy being such a loyal servant for Limerick hurling, but it was always, you felt last year Graham had to come in and really close out the deal, where now we have identified at least 5 or 6 forwards. I'd even throw in O'Dollig from Monaleen as well. He's come in, he scored whenever he's been given the opportunities. So, I mean, training has to be ferociously competitive at the moment, even to get game time here. So I think it all bodes well for John Kiley and Limerick. I suppose from a Galway perspective, I just thought the intensity was completely lacking on their performance. I don't know, as you say yourself, is there a bit of mind games going on with Shefflin? I think definitely with Whelan on the 40, doesn't want to really kind of cover his hand there. It's going to be himself and Concannon, surely, with McManus drifting inside full forward. But I suppose from Galway's perspective, you alluded to this last week, Kieran, in terms of forward line cohesion. Thank God Conor Cooney was there for Galway, because if he wasn't, I think this would have been an absolute hiding for Galway and something that they wouldn't want to have wanted to face. I mean, he scored 12 points out of 19. I think that tells its own story. Tom Monaghan with 3 points as well. Kevin Cooney with 2. But again, it's, to me, the balance of the forward line for Henry Shefflin is going to be a major equation to break here.
Obviously, Conor Cooney had a great game, 12 points. But I think if you're looking at the worry, Galway only had 10 points from play from 5 different scorers, which for a team with that, the quality of forwards that they have would probably be a worry. I'd struggle to think we've seen the Galway at their most intense. And I suppose looking at the games ahead, if you were to pick one game, would be the next game away to Clare. Their last fixture is away to Westmeath, which you'd imagine, with all due respect to Westmeath, would be a matter of getting the job done. But I think this is probably the last game where Shefflin can, get a good test into these guys, and Clare down in Cusack Park, really hard team to turn over there. I think if we don't see, the Galway we'd expect against Clare, I think there'll be more question marks coming on Shefflin for the year ahead.
I'd agree with you. I think this kind of West Coast derby is going to be intriguingly poised on the 12th of March, because Galway definitely a response. Locals I spoke to after the game, a bit underwhelmed by it. I mean, last 20 minutes, there was a response. Connor Cooney was inspired. A few of the points that he scored from long range, very inspirational. Got the side back into it, but again, it was the composure of Limerick then to go through the lines. Now, I suppose we can talk about Kyle Hayes' incident in a minute here, trial by TV, but I think from a perspective of Galway, there was no real intensity here. I suppose Grealish, cornerback, taken off at halftime as well, is a bit of a worry and a concern. So there's a few things here for Henry Shefflin really to address here for Galway particularly. I suppose I alluded to it. We'll talk about it. There were a few flashpoints during this game here, Kieran, and I felt disappointed in RT's sports coverage that only one incident really was shown, and that was the Kyle Hayes incident. There was an incident in opening period, particularly with Keane Lynch and Tom Monaghan. From an RT perspective, Kyle Hayes in the dock here, and I think from a Sean Stack perspective, he let an awful lot of things go. And I think there's talks of retrospective bans here for Kyle Hayes here, but I mean, your viewpoint here, Kieran, I suppose there was a little bit of physicality in the game for sure, but again, any arguments on Kyle Hayes first and maybe Tom Monaghan? I think maybe 2 red cards here, I think.
Yeah, I think Kyle Hayes, actually the ban was announced. It's a 1-game ban, which will be the game against Westmeath. Look, we're biased. We're Limerick and we're biased, but it was a red card. Kyle Hayes was a red card all day long. I would say Tom Monaghan's offence was similar. It was a strike to the face guard, probably similar force. I think what went against Kyle Hayes was there was probably more intent there, or maybe it looked like there was more intent there. But you're regardless of intent, you're looking at the action, and the action was a strike to the face guard, which by the letter of the law is a red card. No problem with that. But I think the biggest problem is, as you say, only one incident being shown, but it's the consistency. Trial by TV. We've seen it over the last few years, certain incidents, and you feel, okay, trying to leave the bias hat aside, you feel like, any little thing that happens regarding Limerick, you're in the spotlight straight away. Had that incident happen in Waterford and Antrim, or, Kilkenny and Laois, would have had the same, media outrage, after the game. I don't think it would. But I think for what I want is it's just a consistency that, are the CCCC coming in every game, they're reviewing camera footage. If there's no cameras there, what happens? You get away with it because there's no camera there. And I think I don't think we want to go down the road of a TMO or like rugby or a VAR situation, but I think there is clause there for maybe, a third referee sitting watching on the camera that can have an earpiece to the referee in the day and say, pull him back and say, come back, that was a red card, or, on the day. I think if a punishment isn't handed out in 70 minutes, that should be the end of it. But I think this is league hurling, and probably doesn't matter as much. But when it comes to championship and there is a red card, that could be detriment to a team, detriment to a team's progression, be it rightly or wrong. So I think they need to be sure that if they are issuing red cards, that they are deserved. It's a really fast sport. I do understand from a referee's perspective, not everything can be seen, and I don't think that Kyle Hayes incident was seen by referee or linesman. But I think there needs to be a clear set of guidelines regarding procedure for dealing with these kind of incidents, and a consistency is what I would ask for.
Completely agree with you there. I think the consistency from a governance perspective on the retrospective ban, you're assuming that they should be running the tape over every other inter-county game here, surely. I mean, there was other flashpoints during even 1A and 1B that I can call out. There's probably 2 or 3 instances here where was the same retrospective analysis done. We haven't really heard. There's no transparency there in terms of that. So, like last year in the podcast I went on Rugby League and Super League, they are very efficient in governance in terms of their video analysis, but also the retrospective on the Monday morning, where they will be sitting down to review instances like this and a speedy resolution. Again, when media are speculating, a game, 2-game ban, it's really, I feel sorry for the officials as well, to be perfectly fair, that they're being undermined a little bit as well. They're not quite sure in terms of what they're doing, in terms of the referee assessors as well. So I think from that perspective, I think dangerous ground, again, is probably being set here. But again, it may be a warning shot for Limerick, maybe for Kyle Hayes as well, that maybe there's going to be teams here looking to basically stir a reaction of Kyle Hayes going into, maybe last year was Gearóid Hegarty. I think Kyle Hayes could be number one target for any opposition, given that reaction to Brian Concannon there last Sunday. So I think it's going to be all intriguingly poised here. I mean, the 1-game ban, then obviously the Westmeath game, I think there would be an opportunity for Kyle Hayes to be rested on that one. But again, it's probably going to be a close watch here for sure, here, Kieran.
Referees are human; they can make mistakes too, And I think the game that stands out for me was the Fitzgibbon Cup final last year, where Cian Lynch sent off late in the game for University of Galway. I think if you sat down every referee in the country and played back the video footage, that red card would have been given, and that red card could have been detriment to University of Galway losing that game, because they were in control and UL came with a late push to win it. So I think it raised the argument that, it's a fast game. There's a lot happening in the tackle. I don't expect referees to see everything, but I think it opens up the case where you do have. I'm not asking for TMO. I don't want the delay of like rugby where there could be 2 or 3 minutes looking at different angles. I just a quick look. Someone in a van sitting at the back of the stadium with an earpiece saying, "Sean Stack, pull that back. That's a red card," and let it happen in 70 minutes. And anything that's not picked up, let that be that, because it's trialed by social media after the game, and I think that puts pressure on the GA and the likes of the CCC to act, and that's why we're seeing these bans come in.
So, it's going to be a fascinating watch again in terms of the governance and particularly the suspensions and retrospective action on players heading into championship season. I suppose we quickly go into 1B here, round 3. I suppose there was a few games on Saturday, which we'll talk about, and also Sunday. Poor Laois again. They were literally no match for Kilkenny, 34 points. Kilkenny, Laois 118 and O'Moore Park. I suppose Bill Maher lamenting a poor first half performance, but again, it's a 70-minute performance here for Laois, and again, clearly struggling here. Kilkenny really, Pill Drennan, 11 points here. Martin Keohane, Owen Cody, 4 points each. John Donnelly, 3 points. I suppose a comfortable afternoon for Kilkenny, really, not learning a whole pile against their Midland neighbours.
No, and 21-7 at half time, the game was dead and buried by then. Kilkenny had 13 different scores. I suppose it's more like a training session for Kilkenny, really, without placing any insult on Laois. Richie Reid said Owen Cody back. Paddy Mullen played midfield, still waiting for TJ and Adrian Mullen to come back. But I think Laois have a do-or-die game Sunday week, which is possibly their league final against Antrim in Belfast, and you think loser of this game goes to a relegation final against Westmeath on the other side. We'd fear for Laois going to Belfast. I think Antrim, while not winning, have been shown real positives in their performances and kind of push teams in the first 3 games. And I think especially Caisson Park, it's a hard place to go. I think Antrim will definitely fancy themselves to get over Laois there, and relegation final. Who knows what happens, but I think for Laois point of view, if you do go down, you'd worry about where they'll stop eventually. Could it be a tumble down through into 2A and so on? There's 2A is as competitive as 1A and 1B. We all know that. You really would. Looking at the first 3 games, you'd worry for Laois.
I'd agree with you there, Kieran. If they go to 2A, that's an absolute shark-infested pool to get out of 2A anyway. So, I mean, we'll talk about that in a few minutes. But I think from a Laois perspective and Bill Maher, it's been a tough baptism, particularly in 1B, some heavy beatings here. So, yeah, I mean, I think both teams don't learn a whole pile from that game, to be perfectly honest, because Antrim, I thought, had a very admirable performance against Waterford, down to 14 players after 22 minutes. And here's another incident where there was an off-the-ball incident, apparently, for Owen Campbell against Ruben Halloran. Again, I think the footage is inconclusive. So, I mean, here you go. In terms of your retrospectives and stuff, was this actually a red card? So, I think from that perspective here, I thought Antrim acquitted themselves so well here. Keelan Malloy 2 points here. Cathal Gunning as well, 11 points. To be honest, Waterford had to bring in the big guns, particularly in the final quarter, to get this job done again. I know there was 15 wides from Waterford, but again, they got a stiff challenge from the Saffron.
Absolutely, and I think Antrim put the gauntlet down, decided to play it to win in the first half. As you said, look, the red card came 22nd minute. Still, there were 11 points to 9 up at half time. I suppose the Waterford goal came 41st minute and it levelled the game. And then Ozzie Gleeson again coming in, scoring 5 points in the last 20-25 minutes. I think it was the last possible 10 minutes that, Waterford really pushed them out and they scored 6 in the trot. That's what Antrim did have a late penalty save. But yeah, looking at it from an Antrim point of view, yeah, there'll be positives. But I think the one negative or standout for me is, 17 points, only 7 of them from play, across 5 different scores and only 1 point from the bench. They're coming down. It's a long way to travel down. They're giving teams a good rattle, they're giving it a good go, but they are lacking a bit too. Maybe I think there is a gulf between the top teams and the likes of what Antrim are at. They're bridging it, but there is still a bit of a gulf there. Looking at Waterford, I suppose if you look back in the 3 games, you wonder how actually good are Waterford at the minute. I know we haven't seen close to a potential full 15 starting, but draw with Dublin. Okay, you questioned that Dublin possibly should have got over the line there. Now with Antrim and Laois, but I think the next 2 games is when we're really going to see how good this Waterford team are. Travelling to Thurles Saturday week to play Tipperary. And I think Thurles is where they're going to be playing their nominated home games for the championship. This is going to be home for them for the next couple of months, and I think possibly that the likes of Thurles will suit Waterford. They're a running team. I think Farfield is plenty mightn't suit them. I think it'll be a test of how good Waterford actually are the next 2 games against Tipperary and Kilkenny. Coming to the latter stage, I think they've been kind of eased into this league. There has been positives, but I think there's been a few question marks too. I think we'll hold judgment for the next couple of weeks to see how these 2 games go.
Yeah, I'd agree with you there, Kieran. I think it's been topsy-turvy for Waterford, particularly from a disciplinary front. First 2 rounds, 3 players sent off. And again, having to really look at the bench, the experienced guys coming in to really rescue games. I think in terms of that Laois performance as well, they were under the pump with going into the final quarter and then really put 11 points in the subs bench to put that one to bed. So I think there's more questions than answers at the moment for Waterford. But as you say, going to Thurles and also having Kilkenny, the old enemy, coming to Nolan Park as well, I think will be a key one as well here, Kieran. So I suppose, they're sitting on 5 points at the moment. So look, from Davy Fitz, progress, but I think some of the wides against Antrim as well were very disappointing. A bit of lack of composure, particularly shot selection was probably one video analysis for them. But I suppose Saturday night as well, but the marquee game was Tipperary and Dublin, and Tipperary 3 from 3 now, 223 to 24 points at Croke Park. That was a curtain raiser ahead of that Dublin Clare Football League game. And I suppose Jason Ford and Gearóid O'Connor really been very prominent in maybe the headlines here for Tipperary from an attacking sense. I
think Gearóid O'Connor is going off for Tipperary a lot this year. Position him in centre forward. He's a big player, physical player, and really good striker of the ball. 2 good points from either side of the field. Look forward, we know how he's exceptional. I think he's in top form at the minute. Tipperary, I think if you look at the other side, Donald Burke, what a masterclass of point taking. Yeah, 14 points. The only downside, I suppose, is he's going off injured. I think Dublin will sweat over this because I think Donald Burke, Dublin are going to heavily rely on Donald Burke, as they have done for the last couple of years. So you wouldn't expect him back. It was a hamstring injury, I think, so you'd imagine it'd be a few weeks anyway. But, looking at the game, Tipperary have impressed. They never looked like losing that game, and I kind of question marks with Brian O'Meara going in full back, having already tried Michael Breen. And, I think the perception out there is that Breen, we know that Liam Cahill sets up his teams, they're fit, they're competitive, especially at breakdown, turnover. We've seen against Kilkenny, the turnover, 1-6 Kilkenny's puckouts. And, I was questioning why O'Meara was going to play full back. I thought he'd have been, a shoe-in at centre back. But I think Rory actually mentioned this a few weeks ago, probably something in it, that the fullback job description has changed. The days of a fullback being plunked in a 14, I think bar Dahi Burke is kind of gone. Most teams are playing two men inside, so your cornerbacks are covering, and I suppose your fullback is kind of playing a bit of a freer role than you would normally associate. So it possibly could be a role that might suit O'Mara. I think he's all the hurling for it and composure, and I think Michael Breen might be a better option wing back. He's a quick. You kind of compare him to Caleb Lyons or Kyle Hayes. I think the way Liam Cahill deployed Lyons at Waterford really effective, and I think maybe Breen is looking at an option like this for him. Yeah, I think they could do no more. I said 3 from 3. The next few weeks playing Waterford, I suppose, I expect to see a closer to strength Waterford than we have seen. I think that'll be a real test and kind of a litmus test to see where they are at. And then away trip to Antrim as well to finish it off. So I think 2 stern tests ahead for them. Okay, we know they're maybe lacking depth with a lot of injuries, and I think maybe it's the championship before we'll see the depth being an issue. But I think he's unearthed a few players. Grode O'Connor being one of them. Connor Bowe as well. He's took his goal well. Come on, Mark Keogh. Again, sure. I think the one player I've really question mark is Jake Morris. He's been on the scene for a few years now, and I expect more of a consistency from him that we haven't seen. I think that's one player that typically gets firing in there with Ford, and we've seen the cameos coming to Bonner Marr and these guys coming on late. There is a mix of players in Tipperary, but I think Gal will be happy 3 from 3. He can do no more.
I'd agree with you there in terms of Jake Morris. I think an awful lot of Tipperary fans are really expecting Jake Morris to really have a strong year. He's been in the panel now for a few years, but I think individually, good player. I'd question in terms of the team ethic. There was another 1 or 2 goal scoring opportunities here where players inside maybe better positions to score a goal and goes for his points. So much to the derision of, I think, Jason Ford again on Croke Park. So I think from that perspective, I think Liam Cahill's probably going to have some words here with Jake Morris in terms of that. But I think you've called him out in terms of Connor Bowe. I think he's going to be very much an exceptional talent here for Tipperary. The 1 goal, very opportunistic. Grode O'Connor as well. I suppose Alan Tynan as well, 2 points, was kind of a key guy as well. But I think he hit nail on the head here in terms of Michael Breen. I think the versatility of Brian O'Mara, just put him back into full back, just wanted to test Michael Breen out at wing back. I think that's definitely a long-term option. I suppose you've Brian McGrath or Ronan O'Mara as well, that can go centre half back or even full back for that matter. And I think there's news now that Barry Heffernan is well on his way back from his injury, his knee layoff. So again, another option there at full back or maybe in midfield as well. Again, there's maybe a little bit of depth chart issues in certain points. But I think from Liam Cahill's perspective, I think they just want to just create with this winning 1, confidence building. And as you say yourself, this Waterford game on the 11th, I think it'll be quite a significant game just to see where Tipperary now are at. Because, again, the Antrim game, we just don't know in terms of Antrim where their heads will be at, given the relegation playoff, maybe concerns. So I think from that perspective, Tipperary looking as if they're getting into a semi-final here for the playoffs. But again, if they get any more injuries here, Kieran, it must spell doom for them in terms of Munster Senior Hurling Championship coming around the corner.
Yeah, absolutely. As I said, with the round robin, you need there's a certain depth, of players required, and I think as well the players they've lost, like of Cathal Barrett, experience guys as well. Niall O'Mara, yeah, for a young team in transition, they don't need players like that on the injury bench. Definitely not.
Exactly. So, I mean, as you mentioned, Donald Burke from Dublin, amazing performance there in Croke Park. The 15 points there, and again, 6 of them were from place balls. 132 he's contributed so far, Kieran, in the league so far. So if there's any extended leave from Donald Burke, I think Miall O'Donoghue will be sweating here in terms of who is that guy to really pick up the slack. I mean, they were competitive throughout. I suppose it's just now trying to find that foil, that fulcrum along with Donald Burke. I know Considine chipped in with a few points as well. So I think for Miall O'Donoghue here, the Donald Burke injury might be an interesting kind of side note here, given the last few games here, particularly when they have to go to Kilkenny in round 4 and then finishing with Laois and Parnell Park. So I mean,
I think you'd worry, wouldn't you? You'd worry that. I think Alex Considine has impressed in the first few games, but you'd worry that if Donald Burke doesn't line out, you're kind of questioning where do all these scores come from. I think for Michael O'Donoghue coming in, like last year, Dublin relied on the same 15 players, and I suppose there was no depth. I think Michael O'Donoghue is trying to go about that. Surely to God, with a million people in Dublin, there has to be 23 players, and I think he's looking at all avenues. And it is first year, and I don't think much will be expected. But Donald Burke is the marquee player, and heavily relied on. And if he doesn't line out, and if it is a longer injury than maybe they'd hope for, you put into question the championship. Then I think Dublin, if you're looking at Leinster, you'd probably give automatic selection to Kilkenny and Galway. You'd imagine they'd be strong enough and have strong enough panels to see it out. And for me, I think it's going to be a shootout between Dublin and Wexford for the third spot. But I think if you're at Dublin going into battle without Donald Burke, I think you're making Wexford favourites all day, because I think they heavily rely on his presence on the field.
Yeah, I know at the start we talked about Wexford and their struggles, but at least Darragh Egan is testing his squad out. At least he's testing what he has. I don't think you can say the same for Micheál O'Donoghue here in Dublin. I think they've gone very aggressive in terms of the league. I'm even calling in terms of the Antrim game. I think that was an opportunity to really run the rule over other attacking players. You Donald Burke on the pitch. So I think from that perspective, the load of games, the minutes has really come back to bite Micheál O'Donoghue and this Dublin side. So yeah, for me, I think for Darragh Egan and Wexford fans, I don't think it's all doom and gloom here. I think there is a plan here. And I think from Dublin, I think they're in a little bit of a bother here in terms of trying to find a nucleus of a forward line. And time is running out for them, quite frankly. I suppose we can go 2A here, Kieran. And this has been a league that I'm being fascinated by from round one. And again, last weekend, no exception. Some marquee results, particularly down at Fitzgerald Park in Killarney. There was a last-minute sideline cut from Offaly to beat Kerry 22 points to 118. It was kind of a superb game all through. I mean, draw probably would have been a fair result, but Offaly just nicking the result there. Kildare going 3 for 3. The juggernaut. You had like James Burke here chipping in with 10 points. We had Cathal McCabe as well coming in with 3 points as well. 223 to 19 points win over Derry. And then I thought the feisty affair here between Carlow and Down. I noticed here, Kieran, Carlow had an awful lot of the frontline guys back for Down, and Paddy Boland 4 goals, 524 to 119 against Down in Netwatch Cullen Park. Marquee statement from Carlow, and I think they're building a bit of momentum. They mightn't get into the 2A promotion race, but by God, I think Joe McDonough Cup of time, they could be a very competitive outfit here. Yeah,
and I think looking at the final 2 rounds of fixtures, there's going to be a couple of twists and turns before the league is decided. I think there was a real scalp for Offaly going down to Killarney, overturning Kerry by a point. They kind of struggled early on in the game, and they, I think when after the Conway goal, Offaly kind of rallied a bit, and they were leading 13-15 at half time. And I said the last puck of the game from our sideline from David Nally won the game for Offaly. I think Offaly, 2 testing games for them. They're going facing Carlow and Kildare, both at home next 2 games, and then Kildare are facing obviously Kerry and Offaly. So the top 3 teams in the group, they're all going to play each other in the next 2 rounds, and I don't think you could write off either of them. I think Clare probably have been, Clare have been impressive. I think Kerry, I think there's probably a little bit of pressure on Kerry. I think for Stephen Mumphrey, they've been close the last couple of years, and I think it's do or die for Kerry this year. Definitely in Joe McDonough, because they've been thereabouts, and that's probably a bit of an expectation now. But this is group is really hotting up, and then at the other end, you've Down and Derry in a potential in a relegation battle. Down actually playing Derry next round out. I think there'll be plenty of twists and turns to come.
Delicately poised both ends of the table. I think Kildare, their fixture list, that first game out against Carlow really has set the tone, hasn't it? You've talked about looking at Kildare firsthand in terms of Naas, a few years ago. I think there's been massive underage investment in Kildare hurling as well, given the Kildare clubs are being kind of getting more exposure, particularly in Kilkenny championships. It's all boding incredibly well, but I mean, there is some real hot games here for Kildare to come. And I think, hopefully the Kildare public can really come and support this Kildare hurling team, because it would be a massive tonic here if they could actually get promotion to 1B. I think it's a big, massive story here, just given the population here within Kildare. Spreading the gospel of hurling, really. But I think Offaly here, Kerry, I think it's intriguingly poised. I think under A, anyone could beat anyone. So I think their kind of games here are really going to be fascinating. And I mean, for down in Derry, the thoughts of going back to Dupee is probably, something that they don't want to contend with right now. But that's, I think, where they're facing right now. But no, I think it's been a very exciting league so far, and as you say, Kieran, plenty of twists and turns, and we'll kind of follow that in the next few weeks.
Yeah, and I think with Kildare, it's just one more point to make on Kildare. Like, it's fair play to him. Like, David Herity's there a couple of years now, and he's been given the time, and they're building year by year. So I think it's like an advocate for county boards to back management and give them the time and the support, because I think it's kind of reaping dividends now for him.
David Herity, quality hurling man, in terms of all these coaching tenures as well. But the grassroots has been put down there, Malady as well, particularly. So there's been an awful lot of solid foundation work going on here into county in the last few years. So this emergence hasn't really come by accident. So I think, Kieran, an awful lot of good vibes in Kildare, but I mean, tougher challenges lie ahead here. I suppose we can conclude here, Kieran, with the Croke Cup semi-finals around this weekend in Birr. You have Cashel emerging victorious in the Harty Cup, facing the juggernaut, which is St. Kieran's. And also you have Thurles CBS, who've come through a very difficult, sticky quarter-final against Closhdown of Dublin. They're facing the presentation of Athenry with one Aaron Nyland. I suppose, any predictions here, Kieran, on those two games?
Yeah, I suppose looking at Cashel and St. Kieran's, you'd hope for Cashel that the Harty Cup final wasn't their All-Ireland final, as they say, coming over to Thurles in a low-scoring final. You look at Kieran's, disappointed coming into the qualifier or the quarter-final game, and look really, really impressive over Raphael Flacray. I think they'll be all out to carry on from that quarter-final win over for Cashel. I predict St. Kieran's to be very, very strong. Regarding Thurles, I think Thurles would have been disappointed to be turned over in the Harty Cup final by Cashel. And I expect, I heard so many good things about Aaron Island. He seems to be highly regarded there. But I just think Thurles is such a huge pick, and a lot of that Thurles team would have been that Tipperary All-Ireland winning minor team last year. I just expect Thurles to be that bit too strong, and I go for, I think it'd be St. Kieran's and Thurles in the final. But I think, if you're not on Saturday, a trip to Birr for 2 games, you could do far worse.
Yeah, I think if the weather holds up here, Kieran, I think they're 2 magnificent games. St. Brendan's Park's a magnificent hurling pitch, really suited to, secondary school games of this magnitude. So, I mean, we'll go first here with Thurles CBS and presentation at Athenry. I think, to be perfectly fair, Aaron Island is really the scoring fulcrum that makes this presentation at Athenry team tick. Clarenbridge clubman, he did contribute 13 points to Athenry's win over Raphael's College of Ochray in the Connacht interprovincial final. So, I mean, that's kind of boding where Thurles maybe have to focus here. I know Lean as well, the captain, very prominent as well. But, I mean, I think Thurles CBS do have a big pick here. An awful lot of mid, south, west tip representation. I'm going to give them the edge by 4 or 5 points. And I'm with you here, Kieran. I'm thinking about Tulla last year, their inaugural maiden Harty Cup final win. There was an awful lot of good vibes. Then they were cold for 4 weeks, and then they came out in the semi-final and didn't really perform. Where Kieran's have come through this quarter-final, I know against St. Raphael's, but there's still momentum has been built here. So I think from that perspective, Kieran's looked awesome against St. Raphael's. Didn't give the Loughrea school any time to settle into this game. And I'd worry for Cashel a little bit. I know they're a very big physical side down the middle, but Kieran's have a knack, a bit like Limerick. Their hurling IQ is so good that they can beat you anyway through the lines or going direct in. And particularly that third quarter burst, St. Kieran's I think might be decisive. I'm going with you as well. I think it's going to be a St. Kieran's Thurles CBS final. But again, we wish all the 4 teams best of luck. Hopefully they're very competitive games, and we'll have in-depth analysis on that next week, Kieran. Kieran, we'll leave it there. Plenty to discuss and whet the appetite. many thanks for the contributions. And I suppose next week we'll have a look at the previews of round 4 of the Allianz Hurling League games and also the Croke Cup semi-finals as well. Kieran, until then, have a great weekend. Chat soon.
Thanks, Mark. Cheers.
Thank you for listening to this podcast episode. If you liked what you heard in this podcast, why not subscribe to the Hawkeye Sidekick podcast on either Amazon, Spotify, YouTube or Twitter platforms. You can also follow me at Hawkeye Sidekick on Facebook and Twitter for the latest sporting opinions, articles and reports.